in Canada or evening in Israel, whoever's joining us from wherever you're joining us. We're about to start another episode of the Never Again live podcast series with our special guest today, which we'll introduce momentarily. So today's guest, for those of you with us last week, is our second time on our show. And basically, we're going to talk about the vision of Rabbi Meir Kahane regarding the vision of a Jewish government, as we see would be the most fit. Those of you who aren't familiar with Baruch Ben-Yoseph, basically, after completing high school in the Bronx in New York, he enlisted Israeli Defense Force Commando Unit. He made Aliyah. He attended Bar-Ilan University, and today he practices law in Israel. He's quite prolific in his fight against anti-Semitism. Here he is being shown, and some people may refer to he and both Meir as radical. I personally refer to them as reasonable because they're speaking the voice that too many people, too many Jews in particular, are embarrassed about their Judaism, their aspirations, our success, our achievements. But that's certainly not the case with Baruch Ben-Yoseph or with Meir Kahane, who we'll have on the screen momentarily. And he'll also talk about the Parsha of the week. So without any further ado, Meir, take over.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to ask everyone who's going to be joining us, just like last week, just like every time, if you could please share this on your various social media platforms, be it Facebook, different groups, different pages that you're part of, Twitter, Instagram, whatever platform you are on, use the link, share it. The information that we're giving over today, or that we always give over, but especially today, it's essential because there is a problem with the presentation for Israel by pro-Israel groups. They're lacking, to get to the bottom line, to articulate what is a Jewish state, what and why a Jewish state. They don't argue that. They don't argue that. But we're going to be discussing the vision and according to Jewish law, what is the Jewish government? And Jews should not be ashamed of our heritage. What is the truth? If you even balance anything, the idea of a Jewish state versus what's going on in the Middle East with countries that surround Israel, monarchies, dictatorships, Islamic states. The values of a Jewish state have nothing to do with the values of an Islamic state. The Jewish people contribute to humanity in a major way. And in terms of what's very important to people, spirituality, your connection to God. The Jewish people are the chosen people. We have the truth with Torah, and we want to explain this to people so they have a sense of fulfillment of what it is, what makes people tick, what makes the Jewish people tick, what is the truth. This past Shabbat, we read in all the shuls, the Parshos Todot, and there's a lot in it. There's the struggle between two brothers, Esav and Yaakov, it's one thing. There's also the incident of Isaac, who Avram was prepared to offer on the Akedah. So it says in the Parsha that there was a famine in the land. And in the land, there's a famine and there's a drought. And Isaac is going to leave Israel and is going to go to Egypt until the drought and the famine is over. So he heads towards Gerar, where the Philistines are. These are not Arabs. These are not the so-called Palestinians of today. But it's very interesting. But the characteristics are similar. So he goes to Gerar because through Gerar it would be easier to get to Egypt. But God tells Isaac, you are holy because of the Akedah. Stay in the land of Israel. So he stays in Gerar, probably because during this drought, at least it's close enough to the sea, and it will be easier to survive the famine and the drought. He becomes prosperous, becomes very prosperous, and he starts digging wells. Now you can imagine during a drought, if you're going to be the pioneer of water technology as Israel is today. So there's Isaac digging wells, successful, and the wells are bringing forth water. More than enough for him, enough to share with everybody else. But the Philistines, it says in the Parsha, that they had this hatred for him when they saw that he was becoming prosperous. So they would sabotage the well. And then he went somewhere else to establish another well, dig for another well, and it worked. And again, they sabotaged it. Then the third well, he was successful. No one touched it. What's going on in Israel today? How similar is this hate? Sending incendiary balloons from Gaza into Israel, burning up fields. And when you burn the fields, obviously on the side of the fence where is Israel, where they divided it, that area in Gaza is also not going to be fertile. And when you set fire to forests on the outskirts of Jerusalem and throughout Israel, not only are you harming Israel, you're harming, if Arabs wanted to have a fertile land in order to have a farm or whatever people do to be successful in growing and being prosperous. But no, that hate that existed then, that deep hate, that irrational hate, is still around today. And when they chant Free Palestine and from the river to the sea, they're clear. They're clear. And if it means burning up the entire country, they're into that. And they back Iran with their ambitions to build a nuclear bomb and send it to Israel, or to supply to Hamas, Iran to supply to Hamas and to Hezbollah and forces in Syria to put nuclear tips on their bombs. That's what their vision is. That's what their hate is. That's how they're driven. And so we have to argue for Israel's defense, and we have to expose all these threats. There's no question about that. But we can't ever lose sight of the vision of what is a Jewish state, what should it be. So we have Baruch Ben-Yoseph with us. He's a friend of mine. He was with the Jewish Defense League for many years, and we have the same rabbi, Rabbi Meir, and we're bound by that. That's the vision. That's the vision that gives us clarity. And so Baruch is going to explain, and Baruch could expand a little bit also on the Parsha. He had a wonderful Shabbat in Malay Damim this past Shabbat. It was at a minyan. I was there when it was founded 25 years ago. It's a Shlomo Carlebach minyan. Maybe Baruch could tell us a little bit about how the Shabbat was, and then we'll get into learning. So, Baruch,
I'm here.
How are you?
Right before we introduce Baruch again, I see if several people just joined us who missed the introduction. So I just want to, again, tell you all about Baruch, who's going to be joining us and is on the screen right now with Meir. And again, he took Aliyah right after high school, moved to Israel, enlisted in the Israeli Defense Force, and he speaks out against anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism, Jew hatred, as does Meir. And although some people refer to them as radicals, I refer to them as reasonables. So it's an honor to have not only Meir speaking, but Baruch Ben-Yoseph with him. So here's Baruch. You guys take it over.
You hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Great to be back. And okay, so before we start learning, I'll tell you a little bit about the Shabbat that we had. It was very inspiring to be back there. I've been out of Ma'ale Adumim already now for over 10 years, but to be back, to be part of something that we all started together 25 years ago. As one of the rabbis there pointed out, almost all the synagogues there, people go to pray, and they're looking at their watch. And when is it going to be over? They're there just to be seen, and they can't wait till it's over and get out of there. Unlike our minyan, which is no one's there with a stopwatch. It takes it's a slow minyan. It's for people that really want to pray. They want to be happy. They want to sing. They want to dance, and and that's really the important thing. Is that it doesn't matter if you're old or young or whatever. If you want to really pray, that's what to pray. So, what did I speak about? I'm not going to tell those. It's kind of long. I'm not going to tell the whole talk that I gave at the Kiddush after the morning service. But I'll just go to the end of what I spoke about, because I was asked to talk about some of the experiences that we had, some of the stories, and I could tell a lot of stories. There were a lot of great experiences, happy, sad, so on. But I said, well, two of the strangest experiences were in the fourth year of the minyan and in the eighth year of the minyan. So the fourth year, of course, Michael Brand was one of the founders, was the main founder of the minyan, and his son Yehuda Aryeh was, of course, one of the people that prayed often in the minyan in the shul. When he was around, of course, he was in yeshiva most of the time, and into the fourth year of the minyan, he came home from yeshiva, and he never woke up. He passed away, and that Shabbat, it was on a Thursday. We buried him on a Friday, and then that Shabbat, it was packed. The shul was packed, and we're dancing and crying, dancing and crying. The strangest thing you'll ever see. Somebody walked in from outside and didn't know what was going on, and he saw all these people crying and dancing. He said, "What are these people, nuts?" And then in the eighth year of the minyan, my son Yehuda, who was a good friend of Yehuda Brand, they both learned together in the same yeshiva. They were in the same class, and they play basketball together. In any event, he was killed, of course, in that tragic event near Hebron. And it was also on a Thursday. We buried it on a Friday, and the same thing happened. The minyan was packed, and we're dancing and crying, dancing and crying. And it's like, well, what's going on here? One time we asked Rabbi Kreuzer, who took over the yeshiva for Rabbi Kahana. He's also the rabbi of the settlement Mitzpeh Yericho, overlooking Jericho. And we said, well, how do you explain that? How do you explain people dancing and crying? Does it make any sense? And he said, look, obviously people are sad. That's why they're crying, because of the loss. But the dancing is something it's beyond our understanding, our grasp of this world. In other words, it's something from so high up that it's like from the heavens that they're forcing us to dance, to be happy on Shabbat. It's Shabbat, despite the fact that we're sad. It's Shabbat. We have to be happy, and we got this mixture, this tremendous dichotomy of happiness and sadness mixed together to something that's beyond description. I think that it really touched the people there. This idea that's so different than what we experience, because usually we have to separate. We have to say, okay, we're either happy or we're sad. We can't have the mixture. It doesn't go together. But was such a high, it's just high. Those two Shabbatot were so high that it was like there was, it's just I actually compared it to what's mentioned in the Midrash on the portion of the week about why was Isaac blind. One of the reasons given was that when he was being sacrificed at the altar on the Temple Mount by Abraham and almost was slaughtered, it says that God opened up the heavens and the angels saw what was about to happen and they were crying and the tears hit his eyes and caused him to be blind. Now I don't know what it means. Angels crying. It doesn't. Angels are not people. They don't have emotions. What do you mean they're crying? But I guess something is so. It's so high. It's so deep. It's so high. It's so holy that even angels could cry. You know what I'm saying? I think the same thing was these two Shabbatot were so high that it was singing and dancing and singing and crying together at the same time. And I think that's part of living here in Israel. It's not, in the exile, it's black and white. Here there's a lot of gray. There's a lot of gray area here. It's
Mhm.
a lot of mixture of the mundane becomes holy. You walk down the street and you're fulfilling a mitzvah just by walking down the street. Whereas, you walk the streets of Toronto or New York or wherever, there's no mitzvah in that. There's no commandment to do that. So that's really the experience of not only the minyan, but of living here in Eretz Israel. And so if we want to go forward with the class, unless you want to ask me something about the Shabbat, I'll start the class.
But just want to, just a little side note question. So, I remember that first Shabbat 25 years ago at that Karlbach Minyan in Mali Demand. I stayed by your place at the time. And so I remember Mali Demand back then, 25 years ago. And, you drove me around in there and we walked around in there. We saw what it's like. What could you tell us about how Mali Demand is? Describe it now, how Mali Demand. When the prophets say, can these bones live? And they look at the Jewish people decimated and everything, and all of a sudden,
well, Ma'ale
Johnny's
Domim is
going into the Jewish body and they're living. And Israel's alive. I mean, tell us about what it's like.
Ma'ale Domim is a tremendous success story because it's a city. It's a city because of the size of it. It's a city in the area of Judea and the areas that we liberated during the 6-Day War, and it's a very successful city in the sense that there was all types of Jews living there, religious, irreligious, Sephardic Jews, Ashkenazi Jews, of all types, and getting along together for the most part, respecting each other, and it's always growing. There's a tremendous amount of land that the city controls, is constantly building. But I noticed over the last few years, the mayor of Ma'ale Domim has really concentrated on expanding the industrial zone of Ma'ale Domim, which is called Mishora Domim. And he's gotten some very serious investors to come in there and build tremendous projects that really surprised me because, a lot of business people are afraid to put their money into Judea and Samaria because it's not officially part of the state of Israel and hasn't been
Joe Biden
right. But he found some serious investors, and they've made this have now an amusement park. Inside amusement park is like amazing, and all kinds of different projects besides the stores and the factories and whatnot that exist. So, look, that's one of the problems where I live here in Arba, is that they never really developed the industrial zone to provide work for, employment for the people here. So people have to go outside of Kiryat Arba to basically find work, unless they're teachers in the schools or or something like that, or working for the city. Ma'ale Adumim created so much employment. That's what brings the success to the city. I mean, it's very intelligent. That's what you need. You need employment if you want to attract people. So it's one of the biggest cities, if not the biggest city in Judea and Samaria. And I'd say really that another thing that they have, I'll tell you a little story. I spoke about that last week on the Chayei Sarah when I spoke in Hebron. Is that there's a cemetery in Ma'ale Adumim. Also in the industrial zone of Mashur Adumim, there's a very large cemetery. Someone said, look, there's no room anymore in Jerusalem to bury people. The cemetery is packed. They got to bury people on stories. They build several levels and put people in the walls. I mean, it's just crazy. There's no room. But there's no end to the room that Ma'ale Adumim has. The cemetery is gigantic. They can bury the people that live in Jerusalem. They can bury them in Ma'ale Adumim. It's a 10-minute ride. It'd be great. So when they had the plan to do that, guess what happened? So the leftists, the Shalom Achshav, Peace Now, filed a petition to the High Court of Justice saying you can't do that. You can't bury people from, in a conquered area unless you live there. In other words, for the Ma'ale Adumim people, you can bury them there because they live there. But you can't take people from Jerusalem and bury them in an area that's conquered and not officially part of the state. So the government attorney wrote an expert opinion on it for the court, and he wrote that the police peace now is right. You can't do that, and he also wrote a cemetery is something permanent. It can't be moved. So this was before the expulsion of the Jews from Gush Katif, and I said, okay, if that's the case. There's a cemetery, Gush Katif. It can't be moved. But if it can't be moved because it's a cemetery, then you got to protect it. You can't just leave it there for the Arabs to desecrate it. And if we have to leave units there of army to guard it, we could also leave people there for the upkeep. And I thought that maybe it was the one foothold that we could keep in Gush Katif. And I said we have to use this because it's the government opinion. It's the government opinion. They can't now say, well, yeah, for Ma'ale Adumim it applies, but it doesn't apply for Gush Katif. But there was nobody to talk to. There was just nobody to talk to. They weren't interested in winning the battle and keeping Gush Katif. They just wanted to get the compensation. I mean, that's why even the best of people in Israel are so weak. They're so weak. I mean, it's to compare people that are students of Rabbi Kahana to compare to the other people, even the students of Rabbi Cook. It's just there's no comparison. It's night and day. They're so lost. Like I mentioned to you last week about the whole Temple Mount movement. I'm sorry, on the rabbi we spoke about the rabbi's yortzeit, Rabbi Kahana's yortzeit.
Mhm.
I mean, the main movers and shakers of the Temple Mount movement are the rabbi students. Everybody else is starting to wake up, but they're waking up way after the fact. That's
Better late than never.
right.
It's incredible how it has. I mean, when you tell me that there's thousands now coming up, and there was just a few a number of years ago.
Look, the rabbi always said, "What are we? We're a gadfly. We're not the We're not the multitudes. We're the ones who are 10 steps ahead. We're years ahead. We have to be the gadfly. We have to be the ones who start it. Then they'll come along and take it over. They'll take it over. They'll do it better than us because maybe they're better organizers or whatever. But ultimately, it's we always have to be a step ahead. We have to be the ones that get the ball rolling because they're not going to.
That's why when I get, which is going to be very soon, very, 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 very soon, probably next month in December or late December, something like that. I want to start at least once a week a shir from Israel, maybe from the yeshiva. In fact, we'll figure it out. You could come on. You could figure out some other guys to come on once a week to be transmitted from Israel at the right time that could affect Jews in North America at the right time, that one day a week they could hear the truth. They could, more than hear, they could learn the truth, the idea, where they have to give their full attention to what was Rabbi Kahana teaching, and not a lecture, but right from his Sfarim that he wrote. And it cuts through everything. Be great.
Okay, let's move on because I got some people that are outside there waiting for me, so let's do the class.
Okay, so Jewish government.
Okay, so again, remember last week what we discussed.
Mm-hmm.
In just very shortly, let's go back and point out, because really the Rabbi Kahana starts off the chapter of the Jewish government in his book, the Jewish Idea, the authentic Jewish idea. He really starts at the point where we left off last week, which was the idea of us being separate and not wanting to be part of the nations. We want to be separate and holy by being separate. And that's, he says, is the purpose of the Jewish state. That's the purpose of the Jewish government, to be able to enable us to be this holy nation and to be separate from the other nations, so that we can, as the Torah tells us, to be a nation of priests and a holy nation. So that's how he starts off the chapter, dealing with the Jewish government. And he brings down, and he starts it off also with the Rambam Maimonides says are the three commandments that are given to us when we enter the land. The first commandment is to appoint a king. The second commandment is to wipe out the seed of Amalek, the Amalekites, and then to build the temple, the holy temple, on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Those three, and are, there's a certain order. It has to be, that's the order. In other words, in order for us to build the temple, ultimately, we first need to, the temple is the idea of true greatness, true good of the world. The world is perfect, the way Hashem created it, the way God created it. That's what we want to strive towards. But to get there, you can't dwell with the evil that was Amalek. What is Amalek? If you want to understand Amalek, just think of the Nazis. They were Amalek, right? So they have to be eradicated from the world. There's no coexistence of the pure and holy together with the evil and the wicked. So it has to be eradicated for us to get to the point of building the temple. Who's going to eradicate Amalek? Well, you need a king for that. It can't be a democracy. This one says this one says that. Everybody has freedom of choice. Everybody has, free speech. This one says, it's not the right time, so on and so forth. No, that's not the Jewish state. The Jewish state requires a king. That's also how he, throughout the chapter of the Jewish government, he keeps going back to that point, that there has to be one leader leading the pack. It can't be a leadership by committee. There has to be one person, and he says that's what God wanted. He told us in the Torah. He told Moses, that there has to be one leader, and the leader is the king. It tells us in the Torah that you will appoint a king. It's our job. It's our mission to appoint a king, and ultimately, we finally did that. It took us hundreds of years after we came out of Egypt and entered the land to appoint a king. We first appointed Saul, and then, of course, King David. And King David becomes the ultimate leader of the Jewish people. If you think of the ultimate leader, it's King David. And King David's, his chain, the chain of the kingdom of David continues throughout the time of the first temple, and then it disappears. Only it will come back, as we hope and pray, very soon, when we have what we call the Melech HaMashiach, the anointed the anointed king, which is really just a king. That's what he is. He's a king like King David, and we believe that it's his job to help facilitate the redemption of the Jewish people. But whether he does the job or he comes afterwards, it doesn't matter. It's our job to begin the process, certainly, and that's what we're doing here. Where the whole Zionist movement, whether they understood it or didn't understand it, it was to bring the Jews back to the land, redeem the land, build up the land so the Jews can live here, whether it's through agriculture or through building, and then to facilitate the aliyah of all Jews, and build hopefully ultimately build a society that will then build the temple and renew the sacrifices, and then ultimately achieve the kingdom of David. So we're now somewhere in the middle, and part of the mission is, of course, the legal system, the court system. I think that's where we are right now. Basically, we see how evil the legal system is in Israel. I mean, I'm a lawyer. I see it every day. The system has to be totally taken apart and redone. I'm not the one who said that. Actually, it was Rabbi Tzvi Yehuda Kook, Rabbi Cook's son, who said that the Ministry of Justice cannot be fixed. It has to be taken apart and redone as a Jewish system. And Rabbi kind of talks about that. He says part of the Jewish government is not only the king, but the Sanhedrin, the court of 71 judges that sits in the temple, on the Temple Mount. And they rule, they give out, they're like the legislature on laws, and they also judge. There's no division. It's not like the American system of division of governments, of different aspects of government. The legislature is also the court, and all the courts have to follow the precedent of the Sanhedrin, which is the high court. So Rabbi Kahana brings down in this chapter, it says, Imen shotrim en shoftim. What does that mean? If there are no policemen, there are no judges. What does that mean? It means that it's very nice that you have judges making decrees and ruling and so on, but if there's nobody to enforce the law, it's worthless. There really is no judgment. It's like we see today when the police don't do their job in Israel. You say, so okay, so the court rules or the government rules, but the police don't enforce it. So doesn't it's basically anarchy. But in a Jewish system, a Jewish government, there has to be a very strong police force to enforce the decrees and the rulings of the Sanhedrin, the Jewish court, which means that we're talking here, as Rabbi Kahana points out, of what people would call today religious coercion. And they hate that way. It's like a curse, religious coercion. But Rabbi Kahana says to us, he says, in a Jewish state, there can't be people traveling around in public on Shabbat. Shabbat is a national day of rest that people can't be publicly defiling. If a person defiles Shabbat in his home, there's very little we can do about that. That's his problem, and God will take care of that. But in the public domain, there can't be this situation that we have in Israel, that there's open defilement of Shabbat, and that's why you have the police to enforce the law on Shabbat, that people will not transgress the Shabbat. And that's a major facet of the Jewish government that Rabbi Kahana talks about. So it's not only the king who leads the people in battle, but the king's job is also to make sure that the police enforce the law. The king is very involved in the legal system. In fact, he brings down that the Rambam says, the Maimonides says, that was the whole purpose of appointing a king, to fight the wars and to institute justice. So therefore, the king is basically in charge of not only the army, but he's in charge of the police system, the executive branch of the government that enforces the law. And like we said, without that, the Sanhedrin has no power. The Sanhedrin is very, you can't expect the judges to go around enforcing the law. They're sitting and legislating. They're sitting and judging.
Right.
So we're not, we often talk against the police because they don't do their job. Police did their job. No one would be more happy than us that they do their job and enforce the law. In Israel today, unfortunately, you see that it happened in only a few months ago that in these cities, mixed cities, they're called mixed cities, Lod and Ramla and Jaffa, Haifa, all these cities where there are Jews and Arabs living together, the Jews were under attack. Jews were under attack in their houses. Fire bombs were being thrown. They couldn't go outside. Their lives were in danger. And people had to take the law into their hands to defend themselves because the police weren't there. And despite the fact that they defended themselves, they were later arrested. It's like ridiculous. You can't even defend yourself when the police fail to do their job. So really, the system today in Israel is it's just outrageous. And I deal all the time as a lawyer with situations where a lot of Jews have permits to carry firearms for self-defense, and their firearms are taken away. Basically taken away when a false complaint could be filed against somebody. The second a complaint is filed, they take your gun away. Now try to defend yourself without a gun. I have cases of people that live in very dangerous places or work in very dangerous places. And because of kind of false complaint, the police just deny them the right to defend themselves. So are the police going to defend these people? Of course not. Then they're never there when they're needed. It's a really terrible situation. I think that every Jew has a right to carry a gun unless he's insane or something. But for self-defense, especially if you're living in an area that's very dangerous, it should be a natural right for every Jew. Many times Jews' lives have been saved because they were able to bear arms, and that should be part of the system. Whether you're even if you're not the part of the police, the fact that you carry arms, it's your job also to help enforce the law. It's the job of every Jew. So
there's other issues that come up as well that I'm aware of. For instance, it's debated sometimes in Israel in the Knesset, what is a Jew? And they're talking about legislating, who's allowed to come into Israel, what is a Jew? And you have Arab parties voting on this. They're going to define what is a Jew. I'm not going to tell a Muslim what is a Muslim, but non-Jews are going to tell me. The BDS, in fact, one of their big planks today is to say we're not really Jewish, and really, according to the Judaism, it's got nothing to do with Israel. All these anti-Semites are defining what it means to be Jewish, and we're supposed to be like little mice and be quiet and don't say anything. It's outrageous.
Well, that's what the Nazis did. The Nazis,
Yeah.
they decided who was a Jew, and he would be put to death, even if he wasn't a Jew. They said, somebody whose father was Jewish and mother wasn't Jewish, they weren't even Jewish, but they'd still be put to death because their father was Jewish.
Right.
No, it's really outrageous, and I don't know how it's going to play out because it's just going downhill all the time. The lack of government, the lack of police, the lack of the legal system. The army is basically non-functional because of the constraints that are put on them by the courts and the government. I mean, I don't know what's supposed to happen I guess maybe it's going to be full out war. We're going to be attacked from all sides and just have no choice, which is kind of like what happened in '67. They felt like, okay, it was it's the end of the state, and because they fought for their lives, they had this tremendous miracle. The same thing happened after the Holocaust. The Jews said, okay, there's nothing, you know, there's we're fighting for our lives, and they were able to defeat all the Arab armies that attacked. I think it's become too comfortable in Israel. It's become people have become too comfortable and economically, and they don't realize that there are more important things than the economics and the good life and so on. I mean, the ideology, the idea of living in the land, the idea of redeeming the land, of creating this holy nation, of rebuilding the temple, freeing the Temple Mount, all these things. That's what we're here for, not so that we can fly. We can fly to Uman in Ukraine or Brooklyn or wherever, or the Far East or the Far West, wherever they go, they just love to fly out of here every opportunity they get. I mean, it's all right. It's ridiculous. I haven't left Israel in 30, 35 years, 36 years. I haven't left Israel. I mean, I hate the idea of people having to leave Israel.
Right.
When you come here, you just want to come to stay and never turn your back on the land. And that's a problem. People don't appreciate what it means, the land of Israel. So they don't understand that the mundane, the physical can be holy. You can make the physical holy. That's something that's they really have to try to comprehend it to be able to understand it, and they don't. They just look at the land of Israel as being real estate, like anywhere else in the world, which is just
Well, yeah,
unacceptable.
but nonetheless, it's Aretz HaKodesh, and it has an effect on Jews. And there's no question that more Jews than ever before are very involved with Torah in Israel than if you compared what it was in the first time I was there in 1980 to now. It's completely different. And the birth rate, also the Jewish birth rate, it's very positive now in Israel. That has changed. Like you said on the last show, the one leader that could stand up above everybody else and make that change. Until that happens, then we hope that will happen. I don't see why it wouldn't happen. Somebody's going to wake up that has the talent and has the stature that could do it. There's unbelievable talent in the Jewish people. We don't create things. We create water out of air. There's so much that Israel's always inventing on so many different levels. It's unbelievable. So there's got to be that one figure, and maybe in all this confusion that's going on, like with this coalition government that makes no sense, and in all the confusion, the ground is fertile for the right person, the one person, the one Jew. There'll be that one that will step up to the plate and lead in that proper vision, because the people are there. And like you say, there's so much confusion. They're running, and so much potential.
Well, Meir, waiting for you to come.
I'm not that guy.
You're the man. You're the man.
I'm just one of the students of the rabbi that wants to help, like you help. But we all have our talents that could help in a lot of different ways. I'm a little bit more on the, I guess, diplomacy and on that kind of level. But it's going to happen. Yeah. There's no question about it. And like Rabbi Kahana said, I remember him saying often, there will not be a third exile. There will not be a third exile. That's the promise from God. Now, we might go through certain periods of time of certain turmoil, this, that, and the other, but there will not be a third exile.
Right.
He said that. So
Yeah.
I believe it. I believe in the potential. And, I remember Rabbi Kahana, he would say, can you imagine if all the Jews from the United States picked up with all their talent and everything and came to Israel, what a country we would have. What a
Absolutely.
success story and all that. So it's, it's really happening that there is success happening in Israel. At one time, I think today they announced the shekel is stronger than the American dollar. I remember in 1980 what it was. I think it was the lira back then.
Yeah, the inflation.
Yeah.
Look, I agree with you. There's definitely there've been great advances, but we want to keep it moving in the right direction. We don't want to take steps back. You know what I'm saying? That's the problem, is that we take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. That's not what we want. We want to keep the progression of going forward, so that it's like we said. Rabbi Gana said, "There's no time. Things have to move quickly. We can't sit back and wait. And we got windows of opportunity, and we have to take advantage of them. And if we don't, then they close, and then we have to wait a long time till they reopen. So we really need to progress, move forward. Can't wait till you get here. I have to go. So
Okay.
forgive me.
Well,
Some
Baruch,
people are
thank you
waiting.
very much. The videos, they get shared on Facebook. They get shared on YouTube. We had a good reaction from last show that we did last week, Sunday. And with the memorial, we had a great response from that also. A lot of people shared it, and a lot of people are inspired.
Right.
Even last show, I even got a phone call from a Jewish guy who, he's from Toronto, and he lives in Israel, lives in Jerusalem. And he phoned me from Israel. He loved our class that we had last week, Sunday. And he wants to help out however he could help out. And he was involved, this guy was involved with way back when with the North American Jewish Students Network, the great Jewish students.
So when you get here, we'll put together some classes,
Well, excellent.
Good idea.
Excellent. We'll do it.
Okay.
Thank you, Baruch.
All right. Keep
Thanks
up the
very
good work.
much. Give my best to everyone.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, that was great having Baruch on. There's a vision, what it means to be Jewish, what a Jewish state should be. When I talked about potential, when I talk about that, the one man who could change things, I remember in the early days an interview with former President Donald Trump when he was just a developer, when he was something in his early 30s. And he was interviewed, and he was talking about, and he obviously loves the United States. He loves his country. And he wrote about it back then, The Art of the Deal. He wrote about all these things even back then. And I read his books because they appealed to anyone who was an entrepreneur in business. And he was he used to speak before just full houses of entrepreneurs also. People look up to him for advice and inspiration for business. And in the interview, I remember he was talking about the one man who could change things in the United States. And he'd like to help out whoever that man was, but he believes that the one man that would have the vision for the economy, the vision for the country moving forward in every single regard, to be the world leader. The country should be the world leader, and there's so much potential, he said, in the United States. And now look at what you got. You got Joe Biden. That's what happened in Afghanistan is certainly doesn't bring a lot of pride to a lot of Americans, and that case is being made very vocally throughout social media. Everybody knows, but no secret, there's a big division in the country, in the United States. But for Israel, for the Jewish people, with there was the threat, the demographic threat, that the Arabs are going to outnumber the Jews, and Arafat with his proclamation that we're calling on Arab women to give birth to 10, 11, 12 kids per family, and one of the kids will be for the family, and the other kids, the multitude of kids, will be for the what they call the Palestinian cause or the PLO cause, and eventually we will overrun Israel with Arabs, and that's how we'll take over the country. That was one of his tactics, either through birth rate or through terrorism, through bullets. Well, the Arab demographic time bomb that existed at the time, and that's what it was called, a demographic time bomb, has certainly shifted dramatically. And the Jewish birth rate has accelerated, very healthy, very strong. And not only that, but especially in the Orthodox Jewish community, becoming very vibrant and very strong as well. They marry at a young age, and they're and in the Orthodox community, there's well, an example is the CEO of El Al now is a young Orthodox Jewish man, and that's the trend in the Orthodox community. They're very involved in business. You're going to see many more people that were like the Reichmans, Orthodox, and very involved in the business front and supporting the Jewish communities all over the place in a lot of different fields. And especially when we look at these medical advancements in Israel and technology and every single level. And literally, they're inventing water from air also. That's Israeli technology. When you have everything going in such a positive direction, all it takes is that one Jewish man that's going to be able to explain the vision of what a Jewish state is and what it means to be Jewish and what the connection is of the Jewish people with the land of Israel, and how to defeat the enemies properly once and for all. And I mean, obviously, these deals that Israel's making, the Abraham Accords, it's a blessing. There's no question about it. When that happens, when that one person feels inspired to take that step forward and grab the reins, things will change in such a positive direction. You look at the direction of Jews in the United States in particular with the cancel culture. We have a tape we're going to show pretty soon of a liberal rabbi who was bang on in his sermon. He gave like about a 10-minute sermon about the state of affairs with American Jews. And he cited a Pew poll that was conducted, where it says 20% of American Jews believe Israel is committing genocide. Can you believe that? That's horrific. And where does that come from? That comes from horrible leadership, self-haters. That's what you call them. And you know what? Those same self-haters, they existed before the state of Israel came into being, and they continued after the state of Israel came into being, and they were always looking for excuses to slam Israel and try to stop Israel's success. They failed, and they fail in every regard. And Israel, like I said on a previous show, the very fact of the Arab declaration of war on Israel, 1948, 3 years after the Holocaust, 3 years after Auschwitz, is the epitome of anti-Semitism. And this BDS campaign to continue with the Nakba and 1948, they haven't internalized that Israel won. What they need to do is apologize for all their hate and anti-Semitism and ask forgiveness from the Jewish people. And then we can go forward. They are still embroiled in this vicious anti-Semitism. After Auschwitz, to say that Jews who legally purchase land in the land of Israel have no right to do that, have no right to wave their flag. We've only been here for thousands of years. And there's always been a Jewish presence there. Large, small, medium, there always have been a presence of Jews. And how come the Muslims erected a mosque on the Temple Mount on the site where the Jewish temples stood, the first temple and the second temple? Why? There's other areas they could have established a mosque. What is this? Domination? Degradation of Judaism? Is that what the message is? Is that why they built it there? We do have this video to show of this liberal rabbi, and I think it's the same one that I was referring to. If our doctor in the studio could bring it up.
Sure, thanks for inviting me. A couple of quick comments. First, right along the line of what Ben-Yoseph was saying, the right to bear arms, should certainly be respected in Israel, as should be everywhere else. So I add a quick caption that coming soon to a Judea shop near you. Don't leave home without it. Your concealed carry collet bag. And it's right now the Supreme Court is arguing against New York City's law that doesn't let people carry firearms. So that's kind of interesting. If New York is even firing that, and I'll say proudly, I once spent 30 hours in jail for having a firearm concealed in New York. Hey, that's how it goes. It's worth it if you need to use it. Last comment before we put on this quick video is that it's talking about how it's a liberal rabbi talking about the downfall of the liberal Jews. And I think it's inappropriate to give a quick quote there that we're all familiar with Menachem Begin, who said, we're not Jews with trembling knees. Nobody came to our aid when we were dying in the gas chambers and ovens. Nobody came to our aid when we were striving to create our country. We paid for it, we fought for it, we died for it. We'll stand by our principles, we'll defend them, and when necessary, we'll die for them again. And that's exactly what this program is all about. So let me play this video, and then afterwards, Mary, you can have some closing comments, and when you're ready, I'll find something to close the show with. So here's our video.
Okay.
I'm a liberal rabbi, and you are liberal Jews. And in my view, many liberal Jews are misled by the high-sounding rhetoric of anti-Zionist students, liberal professors, thought leaders, influencers, media and social media personalities. For some, the term social justice now means that Israel is to blame for racism in American police departments. Even our own Jewish concept of tikkun olam, repairing the world, has been co-opted by some and distorted to virtue signal their moral purity. 20% of American Jews, 1 in 5, believes that Israel is committing genocide on the Palestinians, according to a recent Pew study. 1 in 5. What a colossal, catastrophic failure of the American Jewish establishment, rabbis, teachers, schools, all of us, everyone. It's my job to counter these messages. If you don't hear it from me, you won't hear it at all. Even many rabbis nowadays fear telling the truth that they know to be true, but are too intimidated by their congregants or whatever, too intimidated to express. You may not agree. Some of you might be bubbling over now with frustration. But it's still important that you hear my views. Perhaps at some later date, you might reconsider. And all the rest of you, you might be fortified to hear that you are not alone. What you have been thinking is what I think. The need for a fair, equitable, and peaceful settlement to the Israel-Palestinian dispute is urgent. Both peoples have an indisputable claim to the land and to human dignity. But pro-Palestinian activity, especially on college campuses, all of you college kids who are here and listening online, pro-Palestinian activity is often led by those who do not seek accommodation with Israel. They seek its annihilation. And we call that anti-Semitism. Israel, for the first time since antiquity, is home to a near majority of the world's Jews. More than half of all Jewish children in the world live in Israel. Threats to destroy the Jewish state are threats to destroy the Jewish people. When they shout, Palestine free from the river to the sea, they mean destroy Israel. Free Palestine for them does not mean coexistence with Israel. It means Palestinian existence without Israel. Ask them. They don't hide it. They simply rely on your ignorance and naivete because they spout words that sound progressive to you. Human rights, civil rights, indigenous rights, anti-racism, anti-apartheid, anti-colonialism. For them, it is nefarious Jewish power centrally organized by Israel and supported by world Jewry, standing in the way of peace, prosperity, liberation, and justice. That is what justifies assaulting Jews in a sushi restaurant. By virtue of their Jewishness, they are complicit in the worldwide Jewish conspiracy to suppress human rights, organized and financed and led by the Jewish state. If these agitators were truly about human rights, they'd be concerned about the real threats to human rights. The thousands of missiles indiscriminately fired upon Israeli civilians from Hamas, a terrorist, fundamentalist, misogynistic, gay-hating regime implacably opposed to Israel's existence and implacably committed to Israel's annihilation. What in the world are progressives doing supporting such people? If they were truly concerned about human rights, they'd be concerned about the 500,000 Palestinians still confined to Lebanese refugee camps 73 years after Israel's founding. They would speak against the rampant anti-Semitism and blood-curdling threats to annihilate the Jews. They would advocate on behalf of the hundreds of millions of Arabs and Muslims deprived by their own regimes of human rights and human dignity. You speak about ethnic cleansing, and not a word, not a peep about Muslim Uyghurs in Chinese concentration and re-education camps. You speak about massacres, and not a word about the thousands of Palestinians and other Syrians gassed to death and the hundreds of thousands butchered by a brutal dictator. How dare you equate Israel with Nazis? Have you seen what the Nazis did? You cannot subcontract your defense and protection to anyone. Least of all, faux human rights activists and their deluded American Jewish supporters who sit in ivory towers, intellectuals who write and think all day, who preen with academic arrogance, but are incapable of understanding what is really going on in people's hearts. Preoccupied with their own shallow self-righteousness, they ignore even basic human emotions, motivations, and drives. Bleeding hearts who have no heart for bleeding Jews. It's all academic for them. We should have the courage, the decency, the honesty to say that our side, the liberal side, is wrong. We too are writing and supporting untruths, vicious, malicious, voracious, fallacious, rapacious, audacious lies. All of us, especially young adults, teenagers, university students, you need to feel anti-Semitism. Feel it in your kishkas. You know the difference. It's been handed down to you generation after generation after generation. Learn to appreciate subtlety, nuance, and context. Develop the capacity to distinguish between legitimate critique and the new mutated form of anti-Semitism dressed up in the garments of pathological anti-Zionism. If you oppose Israeli policies, say so. Be active. Try to influence and make a difference. But whatever you do, you cannot give comfort, cooperation, and credibility to those who hate your people.
Absolutely. Well put. And like I said, there's lots of talent in our community. People have to take a step up and be counted and say what has to be said. That's it. I see there's going to be a video of people burning.
Well, for anybody who's still listening, if it's your Sunday afternoon in Toronto or your morning where I am in Texas or your evening in Israel, you won't hurt our feelings if you check out. But there's so much to talk about, so much to keep going along the lines with what the liberal, self-declared liberal rabbi said is very interesting. I'm not sure how many of you all are familiar with Barry Weiss, who was one of the younger New York Times journalists. She was so proud to be with the New York Times. It was started by the Oak family, a Jewish family. And if you haven't seen it, this is her resignation letter explaining that she felt she was being targeted for being Jewish with a newspaper that was founded by Jews. You can go and Google it online, just go Barry Weiss resignation letter. She published it online so everybody could see. Basically what she states is that every time she mentions the concept of Judaism or Israel, that it gets cut. They don't publish it unless, and very interesting personal note is back several years ago, I was actually on the Anti-Defamation League board. That lasted long enough for me to realize that they were more interested in the Syrian refugees than in anti-Semitism. So I resigned from the board. And that was in 2012. Our local newspaper in Texas thought it was wonderful. Well, until I realized what it was that they were, so I was embarrassed, so I resigned from the board. And the reason Texas I find is so important to me, because there are 2 Lone Star states. There's Israel and Texas, and there's Masada and the Alamo. I mean, it's a proud state. But what's interesting, in Texas, it was illegal to practice Judaism until the early 1800s because it was still part of Mexico. Slavery was abolished in Mexico before it became legal to be Jewish. Is history not taught anymore in our school system? You know, another commentary, we talk about ethnic cleansing and racism. You know, this is a slide of 3 members of the IDF. Is this demonstrating racism and sexism and anti-anythingism? It's just absurd. So I will go and play. They were mentioning the Palestinians in Israel. How they deserve to have a bi-national state solution. Really? I mean, you know, here's what the Palestinians think about their homeland of Israel. I mean, and these are the people that liberal Jews want us to sing Kumbaya with. I mean, it just breaks my heart. So,
it fits Parsha.
So, Meir, if you have a couple of closing words, and I'll figure out some song to play as we close out this. I think the final commentary today should be: go to Israel. If you've not been there, go to Israel. If you've been there, go back. If you're looking to start a new life or to retire or find a place for your family, just go to Israel. Meir, I hope that we can spend some time there together in the very near future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But listen, it was great sharing this information, sharing the teachings of Rabbi Meir Kahane, having Baruch on the show. It's very important to, I mean, we have wonderful shows as it is on issues that affect our communities, but it's very important also to talk about what is the Jewish idea, what is the Jewish vision, and to learn about that so you could have pride in yourself, in our people, and ultimately in our Jewish state and work towards a Jewish state. We have a song that we always end with a song. We're going to have a show Wednesday night. We're going to be dealing with issues of Jewish leadership that some of our leaders, unfortunately, are actually giving a platform to leaders from the BDS. And this is outrageous, and we're going to be talking about that because we need a united front in order to support Israel properly and to fight against anti-Semitism. And when from the leadership level that they're actually giving a platform to the enemies of Israel, that's a big problem. And that has to be exposed. And we will expose that. And Wednesday night, 7:30 Eastern Standard Time, that's exactly what we'll be doing. We'll be announcing who's going to be on the show to talk about that, but that's extremely important. Again, everyone, thank you very much, and please share this, and we'll conclude with a song.
Hevenu shalom, Hevenu shalom, Hevenu shalom.